Good evening, everybody here. We're opening this meeting of the Ware Finance Committee. It is 7:02 p.m. on January 6th. I am toggling between screens here, so I apologize. First and foremost, before we get into roll call, I just want to give everybody, I guess we'll just say some basic ground rules. I think it's going to be tricky, a little tricky because everybody is remote. So for all the committee members, we want to make sure that everybody's able to speak in the order that they've requested to do so. And the method that Naomi has used with the other committees or boards is to use the chat window. So if everybody could take a minute there and just hit the little bubble for the chat window to expand it, it'll expand it on the right. And when you'd like to have the floor, just go ahead and put something right in the chat window. I'll watch that as best I can, and hopefully Megan will help me out there. And let everybody speak in the proper order as you need to or request. And you can write anything. You can just say question. You can just type question. Actually, let's do a little test here. Can anybody just write question? I want to see if your name pops up with the chat request. Megan, maybe. All right, there it is. I see Nicole, and I see Nicole has the floor. All right, so this is the way that we'll handle this. I'll do my very best. Thank you. Got a bunch. Perfect. All right, so I am, as everybody probably can tell, a little bit hoarse from an illness. So please bear with me. If I have a coughing fit, we'll just let Megan drive. All right, so let me go to my agenda 1 second here. Okay, so first off, we're just going to do a roll call. I think the easiest way for me to do this, as Naomi said, is to go through the list. And I will start and go through with committee members, and I'll do my very best here. First in the list from committee members is Gary. Gary Evans is Samsung, correct?
No, I'm Diane Wood.
Oh, Gary's Dr. So Gary's here. Sorry, he's next. And then Samsung is Bill Anderson.
Yes.
Christine Haig.
Yes.
Leah Borla.
Yes.
Clo.
Here.
I see Helene Kirk, but that's Neil Kirk, correct?
Correct. He's here.
James Jury.
Yes.
Great. And then for folks that haven't done this before, the names actually, they skip around sometimes when people are added, so bear with me. Meg Thalen.
Here. Tammy said she's going to be a couple minutes late.
Okay. Is there anybody else in the committee that I didn't announce? Because that's all I saw.
Yes, me, Nicole.
Why are you not in my list? Okay, Nicole's here. Anybody else?
Dennis, is Dennis there?
I don't see him. I have like the drop down I'm scrolling through.
Or Rachel?
No, but Rachel wasn't sure if she was going to be here or not.
Okay.
So she may join us late.
Okay.
So
I
here's
don't
what
see Dennis either.
Okay, so Leah, if you happen to, while we're going along, you happen to notice that one of them log on, we could just maybe note that so make sure they have them in attendance.
Yeah, I'm going to put them, I'm just marking them absent at this point at roll call. And then if they pop in, I'll take it out.
Okay, so what I'd like to do switch now for guests. And I don't know the best way to do this, but why don't let me go through the list as best I can. And then if you could just introduce yourself. I think the first person is Christine Heath.
Hi, Christine Heath, school board member.
Okay.
And is this supposed to be live? Because it still says standby on cable.
There's usually a delay.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Naomi, do we need to check that?
No, it's not going to be live with cable. They're going to take this and upload it to YouTube tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's not live.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
You know what? Let's just go through if you guys want to just go one by one and introduce yourself, please have at it. Whoever's next wants to jump in.
Jackie Coe, Superintendent of Schools, and I'll introduce Natasha.
Natasha Colminen, Assistant Superintendent, and I'll hand it off to Chris Roy.
Chris Roy, Business Manager, the SAU. That's the SAU people. So I guess Zach Lawson.
Yeah, I'm Zach Lawson. I'm the chair of the John Stark School Board, and I like this pattern here, so I'm going to introduce Wendy Curry.
Hi, Wendy Corey, Chair of the Ware School Board. And I think that's us, right? Oh, wait, was Sue here?
Yeah, I think Jim is here, actually. Jim,
Yeah, Sue, I just said Sue, and then Jim should go after her.
Yeah, it's Susan Moran. I'm a school board member as well.
And Jim Newcomb, school board member.
Great. That's a better way of doing it. Thank you, folks. And thank you for coming tonight. Normally, we go through subcommittee reports and old business. I've shifted the agenda. It's been accepted by the committee to have our guest speakers go out of order. And so tonight, I have the school board presentations. And Megan, in terms of, did you have an intent? Because for everybody on the call, Megan had volunteered and she had done all the coordination, because especially as I wasn't feeling very well. So Megan, what order do you think that we should go? Do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference. The binders had John start first, so I don't know if that's the way that the SAU wants to go. I think we just let the SAU do it the way they want to.
Works for me. And before they get started, I did, I chose to reference the electronic documents, which I have in front of me. But if you guys are talking, you all are talking to the documents, could you just let us know which document, electronic document, so we can make sure that we've got it in front of us? Because it looks like there's about, I think it was about 6 or 8 different documents. That's my only request there.
In the binder, I didn't double check, but I think it's broken up as those 6 documents are broken up.
Okay.
We'll be referencing the object summary and the object budget for both. In addition, the overview document for both budgets.
Great. So I would say you have the floor. Jackie or whomever's going to speak first?
I think it's going to be mostly me, and Chris Roy will chime in to help me out. And so I'd like to start. There's some feedback somewhere, but I'd like to start with the overview of both budgets. And there are some things that are in common with both budgets that I can explain in general, and then you'll have the information you need as we delve in a little deeper. I don't know where that noise is coming from.
yeah, I think we may need everybody to mute. Yeah, I'm hearing it too, Jackie. Everybody has to go to mute while Jackie's got the floor. That will probably improve quality there.
Yes, the only person I think who wasn't muted was that Gary. It might have been Gary.
Okay. So if you look at the 2 proposed budgets, you'll notice even though we went into this budget cycle understanding it was a really tough year and that we were going to be really hold the line on new spending, we are at 5.03% increase for John Stark and a 6.07 increase for Ware. And that represents a $690,533.93 increase at Stark and a $954,192 increase at Ware. However, one big thing that I want to start right off with is explaining we are restructuring how we deal with federal grants. Each year we get hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal grants, and we have had those consolidated at the SAU. They truly belong in the district budgets. And so in order to do that, we have to have budget lines to spend that grant funding within the budgets. What we decided to do this year to make that change possible, which actually makes the budgets more transparent, it represents what we actually are spending. We stopped the IDEA grant, which is the special education grant, from being consolidated at the SAU and put those lines into the individual budgets. For the John Stark budget, that represents a $340,521 increase to the Stark budget. And for the where budget, that represents a $406,000, 350 increase. That is 2.5% of the 5.3% increase at Stark, and it's 2.58% of the 6% increase at Ware. So we're now dealing with a 2.5% increase because those have offsetting revenues, and so they don't impact the tax rate. So we're at a 2.5% increase for Stark after you take out those grants, and a 3.5% increase in Ware. Two of the large factors that impact both budgets was the insurance, health insurance GMR. We have a 7.3% guaranteed maximum rate this year. This was a bummer because last year we had a negative GMR. We've tried to work on our usage. We've done a lot of things to educate our employees about being smart consumers of healthcare. But unfortunately, the GMR came in at 7.3. What that means is there's going to be a maximum of a 7.3% increase. But that is the number we're required to put forward for our health insurance. That guaranteed maximum rate impacts the Stark budget to the tune of $58,810. And the Ware budget, $226,938. The Stark budget had some census changes, which made that healthcare number lower. The next big factor that influences both budgets is our mandatory employer contribution to the New Hampshire Retirement Fund. Every 2 years, they set those rates, and they do it based on what they need to sustain the retirement fund. And then once they set the rates, they tell us what we're required to contribute. Those rates increase for teachers, all instructional staff, they increase 3.22%. And so that's over 3% of our instructional staff's salaries. And then 2.89% of all other employees who get retirement. So at John Stark, that is a $176,039 increase. And at Ware, it's $166,498 increase. With those those make up the bulk of both of the budget's increases. What we're left with is an under 1% increase in each of the budget. So I'd like to do, after that general overview, I can dig into each of the budgets individually, if that makes sense.
Apologies. I don't know if that was me or not. What I was going to suggest that we pause just for a second to see if anybody has questions on the general overview, or if it makes sense for us to go into the individual budgets, and I'll throw that out there for a minute. Actually, Megan has the question, so we'll let her drive now.
Sorry, my cursor was on the other side of the screen. I did have a question. What was the threshold that you used to include it on, what did you even call this? On the overview. So like you have, for the SAU district shares, you show the increase for Ware, but you don't show the increase on John Stark. And the increase was like 52,000 for John Stark. I was just curious.
Yeah, and when I go to public hearing next week, I will have that teased out more. What I was trying to do, because there is Almost no difference between the proposed and the default in the Stark budget. I was concentrating more on explaining where the increases were and where.
Okay. My only other comment was just so that those who got the binder know, it looks like what you have uploaded for where under the contract services, what's in the binder is incorrect.
There is a change. There are two changes that are live because I did this before vacation. The two changes are and they're both on the where budget. So if you're using the hard copy, under the plus and minus between the proposed and the current budget, yours says $961,057. It should say $954,192.68. It's still the 6.07%. And then the only other change should be if you go down to contract services, yours says $14,352 and it's $10,502.50. And that is updated and live on the website.
That looks accurate to what I see on the electronic overview,
Perfect.
just for everybody else's benefit. And so looks like Megan's all set. Next, Nicole has the floor.
Yes, this is Nicole Herbst. Would you mind going over your first point about the offsetting revenues one more time? I just want to make sure I understand that, and the voters we want to make sure that they understand that also.
Thank you for that, because it is really important because it is a staggering increase. So each year, we specifically, our largest grant is our IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. That grant, we get, well over $400,000 in the WARE budget, and in the Stark budget over $300,000. Up until, well, right now, that money is all consolidated at the SAU. There is while we spend it roughly based on the WARE enrollment and district shares, it isn't broken out that way. It's all one pot of money. We need to break it out now, and we need to have it represented in the WARE budget, the portion that is the WARE portion. And in the John Stark budget, the portion that is the John Stark budget. So we've been getting this money, and we've been using it to make sure that we are meeting the needs of students who are identified in each of the districts. It just didn't show up in the budgets, but that's where it belongs. And so it won't exist at the SAU. It will exist in the individual budgets, but we can't spend anything in the individual budgets without having it budgeted. And so there will be, for John Stark, a $340,000 increase to the budget. There will also be $340,000 increase to the revenues. So those equal out. We will not be raising tax dollars locally to fund that. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Just be aware though, the
It's
typical voter is gonna need more, like a lot of more information on that.
Yes. It's actually more transparent, I think, to have it in the budgets because it represents what we're spending on WARE students, on John Stark students. But any advice you have on how to make that crystal clear, I am very open to. Other questions about?
I'm not seeing any other questions, Jackie.
Okay.
Christine just piped in. So Christine Hag, if we could give her the floor, that would be great.
Okay, so I'm unmuted. The way I presented it when I presented a budget was to tell people we cannot spend this without your permission. So we're putting it into the budget to get permission, but we will not raise taxes with it. It is spending permission. And that was as clear as mud, but that was the shortest way we could say it.
I appreciate that. Spending permission.
Interestingly and conversely, we don't need permission to get revenue for it. It's just the permission to spend it.
And I'm not seeing any other questions, Jackie.
Okay.
Can I jump in real quick? The $340,000 number we're quoting, that's the accumulation of both the federal grants and something that you're probably mostly used to on the food service side. Both of those numbers added together have revenue that offset it. But just for clarity, the number that you see on the object budget is actually $325,000 for the federal grants. Just in case someone was looking at that.
Thank you, Chris. And that's a great point too, because we're used to this with food service. Every year we talk about food service increases that are offset by revenue. And so it's within that same thread. So if we look at, if we want to start with the where object summary.
So Jackie, you're talking about the where object summary. Let's see. I want to make sure I've got it too. Oh, yeah, I found it. Where school district default object summary is the electronic one we're talking about.
There's one that's default and proposed. I think.
Oh,
Proposed object summary.
Thank you. I pulled the default. Let me grab that. I'm all set. You guys don't need to wait for me. Is everybody, if you're getting caught, if you need us to stop at some point so you can get to the right reference page, the committee, just please pipe in. You don't need the floor for that. Just unmute. Okay, I have what I need on my end, so I would say go ahead unless somebody else stops us here.
Okay, so when we're looking at the salaries within the proposed budget, there's a $23,000 $846 increase. That is a series of pluses and minuses, but the ones, what I want to call your attention to is primarily that is the increases for those who are outside the collective bargaining unit. That includes our secretaries, it includes our administrators, it includes our custodians. That is $17,700. And then really the only new thing we're asking for in the WARE budget is to make our 2 technology coordinators year-round. Currently, they are on a school year contract, a little about a 210 contract. They work 210 days. There is $25,000 in the proposed budget to extend their contracts to have them be year-round. We're finding our needs for that support. We're strong enough that we're including it in this budget.
Can I ask a question, Jackie?
Yes.
So in terms of those, making those people year-round, are those needs derived by your organic needs, or is it COVID related, or is it a combination?
There were already needs in that area. We were struggling to keep up. There's a lot of stuff that happens during vacations in the summer that we need our folks, to update things, to keep the computers running, to do trainings. And we also need them there when students are there and teachers are there to provide the support. So we already had that need. It got exacerbated by COVID. We did this past year use some of the COVID grant funding to pay for 10 additional days for each of those folks. But we have previously done that, had a need to have them work 10 additional more days that we've had to fund.
What does this translate in terms, you made a reference to the 10 days, but does the 25,000 equate to that, or is there a particular number of hours that?
They would go to a 260-day employee. However, right now they don't get vacation. So it doesn't work out quite to like a per diem but it is a bump. There are two positions. I think one is budgeted for 14,000 of an increase and the other at 15,000. So they'd have vacations and holidays. Right now, they don't have those.
Okay, thank you.
But it gets us about 240 days.
And those increases are also on their current salary. So that, for instance, that $15,000 we may be only proposing 8,000 or so because they've gotten a raise this year and they're not within the CBA. So that those raises,
September, you know.
the budget year after, those raises are considered a proposed raise. So it's actually those two factors factoring into that $15,000.
Under benefits, I talked about really where the bulk of the benefits, those increases are retirement, health insurance. There were also smaller increases within our dental, the flex plans that we have for some of our paraeducators, and then some workers' comp increases. Those other benefit increases are to the tune of $12,500 on top of the retirement and the GMR.
Okay, and so I have two questions here, Jackie. First is Megan, and I'm just going to head and say as soon as Megan's done, Nicole has a question as well.
Sorry, can we just go back to the salary? I didn't type in my thing fast enough. When you're talking about the computer salary, are you talking about, it's on like page 2, 3 and 4 lines up from the bottom. Are those the 2 lines?
They are, yes. Yep.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. And then I just had another question because this number jumped out at me. On page 4, line 2 and 3, the class 1 aide salary for Ware Middle School, is that a position you're adding? And then the preschool aide, the increase?
There is not an additional position. We did a lot of reallocation based on need. So we shifted where people were, and we did that within special education. But we are not, aside from the tech coordinators, we are not proposing any additional positions.
Okay, all right.
Support staff or
okay.
Yeah, particularly for those class 1 aides, those FTEs were in the regular aides, and now they're in class 1 aides.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
And you'll also notice like there's a shift of a special ed teacher from the Centerwoods budget to the upper elementary budget. We also moved a special educator within Centerwoods to the regular education. So again, there's some shifting going on.
All right, Nicole.
Okay, with those additional days that have salary increases, Are there any corresponding increases in benefits specific to that, not just normal increases in benefits?
Yes, well, I mean, the normal, there is increased retirement contribution, but healthcare is healthcare. That does not go up. FICA, retirement, there's $25,000 worth of all of those costs that we have for any position.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions at the moment.
Okay, and so then we're at, I'm sorry, it's a little harder to do this on, so purchase services. There is an increase of 88,632. That is an increase to the SAU district shares. Two things are going on with the SAU district shares. We had the same retirement and healthcare increases that we're experiencing in all the districts. And so that was an increase. But the other thing that we did do is we added a technology position at the SAU. We did offset that with a cut to, and you're going to see a cut to contracted services. We had an instructional coach. We had 4 instructional coach positions. We had somebody leave this year because of the pandemic and our worry about finances. We did not fill that position. And so we're proposing not filling that position and offsetting the SAU, the cost to the Ware School District of that SAU position. And so you're going to see a corresponding cut within the next line that helps to offset that. So that's the contract, the purchase service line. We also we did some shifting to the facilities manager position, shifted to purchase services from salary. So there's a cut to salary and an increase to, but the numbers are the same. It's not an increase to the budget, but the lines are changing. But ultimately that results in a $88,600 increase. To property services, you'll see the decreasing custodial staff contract, which was added to salary, and we also decreased disposal services. And that's an increase, a decrease within property services of $35,820. Other purchase services, the $68,000 increase there is almost entirely our transportation contract. Last year, we had to renegotiate our transportation contract. The special education transportation was part of the default budget last year. General transportation, that increase was not. With the default budget being passed last year, Ware is operating right now on a default budget, we had to, because we still needed to transport students, we had to absorb the increase, the $68,000 increase. We had to absorb that, but it's still, and so we are carrying it into this budget. And it still needs to be in the proposed budget. So, I consider that it's a required, even though it's in the proposed budget, we don't really have a choice about it. Within the supplies line, we had miscellaneous, if you look through that supplies line, there are miscellaneous cuts and adds and there are shifts. Highlighting, we have grade 5 science program that there are resources that we're looking to get. That is a more substantial line item. Within property, that's an $8,600 cut. And that represents multiple lines of miscellaneous equipment cuts and shifts. A lot of that is technology. We had a lot of technology that we were seeking to put forward. We're looking at how we can use some of the COVID grants to purchase that technology rather than having it in the budget. And then other is the grants. And then the financial transfers. That's, we have that's a debt service line. Any questions about the year?
I have a question. The chat box didn't seem to work for me. This is Tom.
Yeah, of course, Tom, go ahead.
I just had a question on transportation, whether that $68,000 is that a reflection of the need to transport kindergartners?
Yes, that is included in it, but that was part of the default budget last year. So that's not the increase. It was already included in, it's part of our default now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so it looks like James got in next for a question. James, and then
Yes.
Chris.
Could you please remind me what the debt services are?
I'm sorry, what the what services?
The different debt services that you have.
Chris, can you help me out a little with that?
I can. So there are some leases that we have at the in Ware. They were all projects that were prior to me, so I believe that there was a boiler at Center Woods, and then was the middle school, was that the roof project?
The roof project is at John Stark.
I'm gonna have to try to look up.
The most recent was the boiler project at Center Woods.
Are there some older projects that are still on the books?
Yeah, the middle school project is an older one that's been on our books for a few years now. So the $2,526 increase that you're seeing is that the existing boiler lease was refinanced, so it decreased the interest but increased the principal a little bit, so it was a give and a take there. So I believe that they decreased the years there.
All right, thank you.
Next is Christine. Hey, Chris.
Oh, James anticipated my question, but I'm just wondering, are there any bonds that are close to paid off? I know we approved something when we moved the 5th grade, but I didn't know if that was in debt service or if that's done.
I don't believe that. Well, let me do some research and we'll send a follow-up report about what exactly that is broken down into. But I don't believe there was a bond associated with the move.
Thank you.
Next up is Gary.
Hi. So I understand that you guys are you're sending a bus around that delivers lunches to students that don't come to school. And I'm just wondering, I'm not saying that's not a good thing. It's probably very nice, but somebody might ask what's involved in costs for all those lunches for kids that don't come to school and for the transportation for that food.
So there's two parts to that question. The first one is the federal government has approved a program where they actually reimburse for the cost of lunches for all students under all children under 18 in New Hampshire. So that is not a cost associated with the budget, and it's not additional taxpayer money. The buses were transporting this spring when we first had the shutdown. If you remember at that time, we didn't know, we thought, I look back at my emails from last March and April, and we didn't know how long the shift to remote was going to be. And at first it was for a couple of weeks, and then it was for another month. And so we needed to keep our transportation, our bus drivers, everything ready to go. And we had a contract. So between having a contract and needing to keep bus drivers and our buses ready should we need to return to school, we decided to use the buses to deliver meals to students who needed them during that time. So we were using the service we were paying for because we weren't transporting students to school at that time.
Okay. Oh, good. So the food is basically free, well, it comes from the government, and the transportation we were paying for anyway. So you're just having them deliver. Good. Okay. Just
exactly.
Good to know that. Thanks.
Okay, and I think it looks like Neil has a question to Jackie.
Thank you, Tom. Jackie, what would the school board and you suggest if the voters decided to reduce the proposed budget by 1%, which is approximately $1.6 million, bringing it down to 15 million even?
We would struggle with that. We're already operating on a default budget, and are you that number is very similar to the adequacy, what we're projecting as our adequacy shortfall. I didn't know if that came from somewhere, your $1 million number.
No, it didn't. It was just a 1%. It's not 1 million. It's 1,670,000. It's 1% of the proposed budget. And the question is what would you do if the voters at the deliberative session reduce the budget, the proposed budget, by that amount? It's a 1% cut. Not a huge cut, but it's significant.
Oh, it is a huge cut. We would drastically have to cut staffing. It's the only place it can come out of.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions yet.
Tom, I'm having trouble with my mute button.
All right, Bill, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I didn't mean to jump in. That's why I wanted to let everybody else have a shot. Jackie, just with I think on the minds of most taxpayers, when I look at them, a lot of people have had reduced income and lost a job and benefits and are dealing with a tighter budget. And that combined with the increase in the pension contributions and the GMA increases, and is there still a potential for $1 million revenue drop from the state? Is that still potential?
Yes. I think it's more than a potential, although I'm hoping our legislators.
Yeah. Ware taxpayers, that's like 4 plow trucks in 1 year.
Yes.
That impact, before we even get into any increases in the budget, would already raise taxes considerably. And I just want to make sure that when you reviewed your budget this year, that you were ensuring that you could take every, reduction possible to help offset that. Now, this is only me talking, but when I looked at like 17 and 18, I was looking at actual expenditures. And then in 19 and 20, actual expenditures. And especially I don't want to go into to the line item by line, but I've said, generally speaking, when you look at supplies and electrical and repair categories, there seems to be a tendency to carry forward the same number from year to year to year in the proposed budgets, which also is reflective in the in the default budgets. But yet expenditures are far lower in many of those categories. And I just would encourage someone to look at that and say, let's put a more reflective number in the proposed budget for what we've actually been spending in some of those areas. I mean, when I looked at it today, I come up with about 160,000 in just, it's about 10, about a 10, a 1% reduction that could save in some areas. But that aside, I just want to make that as a comment.
Mm.
The other comment, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The other comment, and it concerns me, is I know in the SAU contributions, speaking for taxpayers, they never get a say in what happens there. They just have to contribute as part of either the default or the proposed budget. And when you look at that, those costs have gone up 20% since 17, 18. I don't know if that's attributable to additional positions that have been brought into the SAU in order to apportion out to the various school districts, centralizing. But when I look at that, I say, well, there's no control that the taxpayers have, no voice the taxpayers have when SAU raises costs and the contributions. And my question in that area would be, what area in the future do you see those costs continuing to go up? For example, where you're located, is that going to change in the future? And is that all those costs, I think, concern taxpayers, just as another statement. And lastly, do you have any information on what the average costs, what we're spending per student? It used to be in the handouts 5 or 6 years ago. You would compare, here's what we spend per student and where is compared to, say, New Boston and other areas, and we were always lower, and that helped support increases in budgets and contracts. But I didn't see it in the last couple of years. I just didn't know where we're at today.
I don't have that right now, but we are working on that for public hearing next week. We will have it next week as we gear up for that. Where is still lower than most.
Okay, so it wasn't a specific answer I was looking for on the other stuff. It was just a general comment that as a taxpayer, I think that's what they're looking for, is where are you really kind of zero-based budgeting in some of those areas rather than just carrying a number forward that you never seem to reach. That's all I have.
We did try to do the zero-based budgeting that you're talking about. One note on last year, when COVID happened and the shift to remote happened, we froze spending and we bought nothing else. So I think the last year's numbers, and we went without a number of things, knowing that returning money to the taxpayers, and we returned an awful lot to the taxpayers, was really important to have that happen now because of the crisis and because of the pandemic. But we definitely went without. We did have And then we did get some funding and some grant funding that helped us offset some of that.
No, I understand that. That's why I went back and looked at 17 and 18 as well. So the same trend was there and it was, so.
Okay.
Neil, you're up.
Thank you, Tom. Jackie, will we have a more complete review of budget of expected revenues when you hold the public hearing? Chris was talking about that because there's some money that will be coming from the state, not just the lower amount from the formula, but the legislature appropriated some money last year that might be continued. There's more money in some of these various federal programs that we get. Will we be getting a more thorough review of the revenue side?
We're working on that. Chris could speak to it a little bit right now. And as you said, some of it's still working its way through the legislature.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the amount of the revenue that we get essentially annually that we can kind of count on, the projections that we've gotten from the New Hampshire Department of Education, I mean, it's already been touched on, but the decrease to adequacy is currently projected at 1.1 million for WARE. And for John Stark, it's 430,000.
But what about the other programs that gave us more money than in past years? The legislature's, I think, $130 or $150 million program, and some money that is coming to us through the federal government, and the most recently enacted CARES 2 Act.
The CARES 2 Act, we haven't got our allocation yet. We are anticipating that it's going to be more than what we received in the fall. There are constraints around you using that, or there were, we don't know what the constraints are going to be around using that. There were constraints around how we spent CARES and the supplemental, supplemental public funds that we received in November.
Okay. Thank you, Jackie.
Any other questions about WARE?
Hey, Tom, I forgot one. Bill Anderson. Jackie, just a general comment. Has there been any reductions in areas to reflect the drop in students from about over 1,000 down to 870 or so in the last 4 years? When you do your budgets, are there any general areas where costs have been factored in and dropped?
We're talking about the WARE budget.
Yes.
We have had cuts over that time to, and I'd have to look back and see exactly what those were, but we have had staffing cuts in that time. And we've also shifted teachers to where the need was. The current decrease, that we're having trouble trying to predict what that looks like next year, because we did have, in actually our secondary students, our middle and high school students, our enrollment between last year and this year remained relatively level. It's a little bit lower at the middle school, and it's actually a couple students higher at the high school. But our elementary students, I think what happened is, with all the craziness of the pandemic, our really young students, our kindergartners and first graders, parents kept them home and didn't send them at all. And so that's where we have the most significant decreases to our enrollment. I don't know what that means for next year, if they'll come back. As of right now, we're not getting the adequacy for them, because they weren't here this October. But we're struggling to try to predict that.
Yeah. Okay.
And at the high school, we have cut based on enrollment. We've cut, but again, I can look specifically about that.
Not looking for specific, it was just a general comment because I think I always try to sit in the taxpayer seat and say, hey, if we've had a reduction in students, where are we seeing a benefit in the taxes? And it's just a question that I'm sure would get asked, if not by me, by someone.
Right.
Do you mind if I jump in here with an answer from the earlier question about debt service?
Not at all.
So it looks like we did. I mean, it's still a slightly vague because I don't know what the project was, but the lease started in 2005, and so the lease that you see in Ware Middle School for the $900,000 that ends in 2025. So it's coming up to its closeout. And then when we were looking at the object budget, we were actually just looking at the principal number. So if you look up at interest debt service, which is an 800 object, a little bit higher than that, you're actually seeing an $18,000 decrease as well. So overall, our debt service this year is a decrease to offset that $2,000 increase in principal. I'm going to still try to dig in to see what that project was back in 2008 or 2005, excuse me. But at least that's a little bit more information on where we are in that lease.
Good segue, because I think that was the question James had, and James has another question now.
Yep, no, I appreciate the additional information on that. I do have a question going up the page just a little bit more too. Dues and fees. Is this where the curriculum costs come from that are going into the electronic books and things that the kids are using on their Chromebooks and other devices?
It includes a number of things. It does include some of those. Some of those are subscriptions that are within the curriculum lines. But it also includes I believe our hosting. We have had a shift because of the data privacy requirements that we've had. We've had a 3-year plan to shift to hosting and there's dues and fees that come with that.
Sure. No, but and specifically for the curriculum for textbooks, for lack of a better term, for the kids, that's in this section as well. And I know they're not using physical textbooks anymore, but I'm specifically thinking about what software is licensed for the students to use on their Chromebooks.
Some of it is in there, yes. Some of it is still within the, there's music software. There are software lines within the 600 lines.
Okay, I did see that as well. And those are required, that's required to renew every year? Or does some of that carry over?
It depends on how the subscription is structured. Some of them are a year to year, and some of them we enter into longer term. We did an English textbook a few years ago that had a 5-year, we bought the subscription for 5 years.
Okay. I'm just curious about what sort of cost changes have happened in terms of buying textbooks that you could use for a significant period of time versus software that has to be licensed every year or every 5 years. How can we look at if there's an actual cost savings versus, well, this is just the way the industry's changed?
Mm.
Is there any way to make some sort of a comparison?
I'm I don't know that we have a lot of options to just go with purely textbooks. Most of the curriculum resources out there are a blended approach. There's an online component along with physical materials that our students get. And so they're primarily, that's what they offer, both.
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting that we go back to all, to textbooks, but I'm just curious what the overall cost has been, on in general, when 20 years ago when you bought a textbook and used it for 10 years versus software today, that sort of thing.
Right, and it definitely has been an increase.
Yeah.
Those materials are more expensive, and they do get you with those subscriptions.
Right. Are there any other sources of curriculum that you can go to that may not necessarily be quite so expensive? Are there options?
There's, and this happens more at the high school, and it would be, we could put some time and effort into self-developed, teacher-developed resources, open source resources. And I do know there are some high school teachers who are doing some work in that area. So you compile your own textbook or resource for your class with open source or openly available, common resources to use.
Yeah, as a
made a huge initiative with that. That does take an awful lot of time. It also, we tried to do some alignment and make sure that grade 3 for all students is generally the same. And that is more difficult to do when you have a teacher developing their own resources.
Yep, and I guess I'm more specifically thinking of alternative sources for, or simply just less expensive sources than the traditional publishers that may be, it's easy, but it's also generally more expensive. It's kind of like the old sayings, back in the day when it comes to software, you'll never go wrong with IBM, or you never go wrong buying Microsoft, even though there's a lot of other less expensive options out there. Most people don't complain if you stick with the bigger players. So, however, knowing that the bigger players are generally more expensive, and it's probably not going to make any change for this year going forward, but in the future, looking at if there are ways to trim out some costs in that location specifically, that might be, it takes a little time to do the research, but it may be a fairly easy win to reduce costs at some point in the future. Maybe not this year, but maybe in the future. All right, thank you.
Are we ready for the Stark budget?
We are.
Question on that.
Go ahead, Nicole.
On the link, I'm only seeing where. I don't see the John Stark ones. Is it a different link for those?
You should be able, along the top, there are some tabs. And there should be a John Stark tab that has all.
Under more. Thank you.
I was having the same issue, so thanks, Nicole.
So John Stark proposed object summary.
Jackie, I'm just looking at these. I see John Stark proposed function summary. I see John Stark projected object summary.
The proposed that I'm not sure why it says projected, but I think that's proposed object summary.
Okay, just want to be sure I got the right one.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
So within the salary lines, there is a $38,693 decrease within that line. If you look into the detailed budget, you'll see that there are, again, there are some cuts, a number of cuts within there. There are some census changes that happened that resulted in increases and decreases. But the new salary spending within that line, there are two parts to that. One, the high school is looking to revamp how they do summer programming. And especially this year, we're seeing summer programming and live. We've been pretty reliant on a software program to help remediate and to do some of the summer learning that's happening. We'd like to make that more live instruction, working with students. We think particularly this year that'll be really important. So there's an increase there. And the other thing that we are up for our NEASC accreditation. High schools go through an accreditation process. We actually put it off because of the pandemic and are looking to do it going into next year. It involves a self-study where we go through the standards and evaluate how we do things. And then an outside group comes in and they also look at how we do things, give feedback. The study itself requires a committee, and so the salaries for the folks who are doing, which is actually an incredible amount of work, is reflected in this budget line. We did offset. Generally, we have teachers work on curriculum during the summer, and we took that curriculum line to use for the salaries for the NEAS study. But that is an increase, even though it's a decreased line, that is an increase within that line.
Jackie, I have a question for you. What is the accreditation? Can you just tell me what that gets you as a school district? Is what the benefits are to that?
From like an idealistic perspective, the process of going through a self-study for a faculty is a really important one. You look at where your strengths are and what you need to work on. It helps drive goal setting for moving into the future. From a more practical perspective, if you don't have your accreditation, there was a while where Claremont didn't have, they had lost their accreditation, and people think you're a bad school if you don't have an accreditation. I would speculate that it would have an impact on folks wanting to move to this area. It also impacts students as far as their high school, applying to college. If you don't come from an accredited high school, that's not a good thing.
And I'm not trying to pick this apart, just trying to understand. And so what would you say the percentage of schools that are accredited across New Hampshire? Because this is a new concept to me.
Oh, most schools are accredited and most schools go through this NEASC process.
Okay. Thank you.
It's an outlier when somebody isn't, and not a good one.
Yeah, I appreciate the explanation. That's helpful. Thank you.
All right, so the benefits I already explained. That is the retirement and the GMR. Purchase services is an increase, a big increase, but that's actually a shift. There's a decrease under other purchase services, decrease to out-of-district placement. And so we are doing some programming within the SAU, within the high school, that enabled us to bring some students out from out-of-district placement. Under property services, there's a $12,000 increase, and that is increase to upkeep, repairs, grounds, and maintenance. The other purchase services is the cut to some out-of-district tuition, supplies. There are various cuts to different supply lines. And so then we have I apologize, I had lost my place. Replacement equipment is the property, that $7,900 line. There's a variety of equipment that we cut to equipment lines that we cut in an effort to decrease the budget. There's also cuts within the dues and fees, significant cuts within the dues and fees lines. Interest and debt, our debt service cut to a decrease in our interest. And then the transfers is the grants and food service.
Does anybody have any questions? Jackie, I have a question, and I'm not sure the correct way to ask this, but and I'm just going off the budget overview.
Yep.
So when we look at the number, and forgive me if you've already gone through this, when you look at the percentage of increase, the I think it's the 5.03%. You talked about some offsetting numbers to that, and the net actually being, I got to look at my notes. I think it was 2.5%. Is this the line that you were talking about, and that's effectively 2.5% when you consider the offsetting dollars?
The budget increase is 5.303%. The offsetting revenue of the grants that we're going to get, in effect, brings that down to a 2.53% increase to the budget.
Okay, so the 2.53 is the actual the amount, the percent that affects the taxpayer. is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Perfect. Megan had a question after me. Megan's muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My mouse was like off somewhere. I had to find it. I have actually some questions. I was looking at the 1920 actual, and I was just, maybe I missed a John Stark board meeting where they discussed this. Like there was big like heating repairs, and then like a $21,000 jump, and then I'm trying to find the other one that, and then there was like the water sewer issues. I know that there was a water issue last year. I'm just because it is a big increase over what was budgeted and what was actually spent.
Yes, we did have to address, we didn't have water the fall of last year. We had significant water issues. We were bringing in, hauling in water to keep school going. And so that was addressed last year. As was some heating, HVAC, and then we did roofing this summer. The spring into the summer, we did some projects there.
Isn't the heating system at John Stark brand new?
Not all of it.
Okay, all right. I was that's why I was looking at it. And I was like, I thought that was part of because we switched. So we only
some
switched,
of it was the
we did
boiler.
switch over some of it. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, but not all of it. So that this has to do with the
Well,
the old system.
There was some HVAC work, I believe, done, and the roofing.
Okay.
Wasn't there well work done as well?
A lot of the water system and the well work. That was the, we thought that was the crisis until COVID came.
Megan, just to be clear on the heating system bit there, the boiler unit is a massive part of our heating system at the high school. It is the core component that provides the heat, but there are multiple systems that deliver that heat throughout the building. Some of it is forced hot water coming off of that boiler. Some of it's converted into forced hot air in terms of the way that we ventilate the building. So when we work on HVAC, it's going to be a separate system from the way that the boilers function. And so we actually, that does affect our building heat. It's not just where the source of it comes from in terms of our boiler. And you'll recall I talked about these ERVs as being these units that we still had to tackle. That is a massive part of our building climate that we still need to address as we go through our roofing project and beyond.
I think Bill has a question.
Yeah, I do. When I was looking at John Stark budget, I'm looking at snow plowing is about $6,000, but on the WARE budget, snow plowing is about $75,000. And I'm just wondering what the difference is and why is it the difference like that?
My understanding is that the brunt of the snow plowing at John Stark is done by staffing, whereas it's contracted at the middle school.
It does cost $75,000 to plow for the winter at 2 schools and where?
Yes.
That's a pretty good.
The trade-off, of course, is that we have to maintain plowing equipment at the high school. It isn't $75,000 a year, perhaps, but we've not done that cost analysis. We do have to maintain sanding equipment and plowing equipment and all of the things that are necessary to manage it with the staff at the high school. So it's not quite a, $6,000 to $75,000 a year comparison.
No, but I still think it's
Yeah,
quite-
your point is made. It's the difference between making it and buying it. Yep.
Yeah. Maybe a more efficient way of doing it than $75 is what I'm saying.
I can attest, this is Leah, because I bid these snowplow contracts as part of what I do, that it's an incredibly expensive, it's a large part of every budget that I put together, in much smaller areas that are paying $50,000 a year for snow removal. And it is an insane amount of money.
Yeah, it is.
It almost makes me want to get into the snow removal business.
The high school, right. Use that model.
And you know, we could look into that. The difficult, we have had trouble hiring custodial staff across the board, but specifically within Ware. And so we would have struggled this year to maintain the plowing, given we were down custodial staff for most of.
Also, probably not the best year to ask for a truck and a plow in our budget.
I'm not seeing any other questions yet. Are we, is this someplace to segue into, or are you all done?
I think I am all done. So I think also we talked about adequacy a bit. The one other thing I wanted to mention is both districts are dealing with or have ratified a teacher's contract. Both sets of teachers came to the negotiating teams and said, we get it. We're in the same situation as, you know, the taxpayers, and they didn't want to negotiate beyond extending the contract they're in. And I posted this morning the contracts, which are the same contracts that were in effect. And so what they asked for was to move up along the same grid that they were under before. They didn't ask for any increases within the grid. Traditionally, what happens is there is movement of the grid that increases, and teachers move up. Generally, teachers move up each year in steps. All they asked for was the steps in both districts. The cost of that in apologize, I have my notes. The cost of that at John Stark is about $75,000. That is an average of $868 increase for each of the members of the collective bargaining unit. And the raises ranged between $500 and $1,000. Factoring into that is that they are also paying that 7.3% GMR for their health insurance. And so that comes out of whatever raise, obviously, that they get. So the Stark, the Warren article for the Stark contract will be about $75,000, just shy of that. The Warren article for the Ware contract is an interesting one. They did the same thing, and raises ranged between $900 and $1,400. And so that Warren article would have come out to be about $100,000. We have 4 teachers who are retiring. They've put in their notice for retirement. The warrant reflects the difference between the salaries for the collective bargaining unit now and the salaries that we're projecting for next year with the increases. And so because we won't hire those 4 long-term employees, we won't hire at that rate, we're offsetting that warrant article and the cost of the contract. And so actually that warrant article is going to be $5,935. We always offset retirements off of the negotiated, the negotiations off of that article. That's part of what we talk about in negotiations. I've never been in a situation where we've had 4 expensive employees retiring.
So Neil has a question, but Megan asked if you could repeat something I think you just said, the teacher contract number.
And we're finalizing it for the warrant, but for the where warrant, $5,935.
And that Neil has a question.
And
Thank you, Tom. I have several questions about this. First, if both of these articles are defeated,
they do not move up a step.
correct. So in the case of where, while the cost is apparently $6,000, that's somewhat misleading. The saving is $100,000, correct? Yep. And in the case of Stark, the saving is, where is that?
75.
75. So will that be made clear in the warrant articles? So that people don't because you're misleading people when you say that the cost of this is $6,000 because you're not telling them about the savings, which they get anyway, whether they pass this contract or not. So you need to make that clear so people are not confused and, more importantly, not misled.
We would reflect those retirements in one of 2 places. They'd either be reflected in the budget, and that would be, that the $95,000 decrease within the salary line in the budget, or within the warrant article. And I did come right out and tell you how that we came to that number.
I appreciate the candor here, but the candor also needs to be extended to the voters at large. Thank you.
And Jackie, I completely agree with Neil. This is more about us, we're taxpayers too, right? Is it easy for us to see? Because I think to a lot of taxpayers, they don't watch all of these meetings and have the benefit of this discussion, and we can't force them to do that. So if you're able to make that clearer, I think it helps everybody across the board make the right decision.
Yep, I totally understand that. And it happens every year. John Stark doesn't have a retirement, but typically there is 1 or 2 people retiring, and it does offset the cost of the contract for at least that first year. Sometimes we know if it's a multi-year contract, sometimes we know that somebody is planning to retire in year 2 of the contract, and we can project out that way. But that's why I brought it up and made that clear.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? We'll wait for mute for a second. I don't see any other questions from the committee. I think that I'd like to get some clarification, and because I never can completely remember exactly how this goes, but there's a public session, and it sounds like at the public session, that's when all of this data and these numbers are final, correct? Am I correct in understanding it?
Yeah, the board will adopt their budget to move forward with, and then we are still working through what deliberative session will look like.
So in terms of the work that we're doing, and so I guess this is more for the committee to hear, it sounds like our deliberations typically would start, if I remember correctly, after the public hearing, but before our town deliberative session. Am I understanding that, Megan? Am I right on that? I just want to make sure I'm clear as we look at.
Yes, that's correct. We don't we go to the town the school deliberation session and the town deliberation session with our tentative recommendations based on what we have before the deliberation session. We
Right.
don't do recommendations before the public hearing.
Yeah, and for me, it was really, when we're doing our work, because it sounds like not everything's 100%. So when will these numbers be final, I guess, is really what I should be asking, so that we can make sure that we're clear on what we're deliberating as a committee.
Nothing is going to drastically change, significantly change, but officially next Wednesday is the Ware public hearing, and next Friday is the John Stark public hearing.
So that's the official day where nothing will change thereafter.
Unless by deliberative.
Oh, understood. No.
And then the deliberative sessions are the first week in February.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Megan, we covered everything? We covered Stark, we covered Ware School District?
One more question.
Yeah, Nicole.
How will we find out how to access the public hearing and any deliberative sessions for the schools?
Those should be posted right now with the Zoom links.
Okay, great. I didn't look. Okay, thank you.
I will say the deliberative sessions, we are discussing that right now. The fundamental way that deliberative sessions work is different than public hearings. Public hearings are conductable in a way similar to our normal school board business. We've got to figure out exactly how we want to handle deliberatives where there's potential for voting and that sort of thing.
You beat me to that question. Thank you. Because the town's going to have to figure out the same thing, right?
That's right. That's right.
3 different bodies have to do the same.
And we're not intentionally trying to drag our feet on figuring that out. It's we are talking about it like this week actually to figure out kind of what we can do logistically and how we want to try and approach it.
I believe the legislature is also talking about this.
Eileen agrees with you. All right, I don't see any other comments or questions. I'm going to ask one last time before we let you all go. Anybody else? All right, well, I thank you, all of the school representatives, much appreciated, and appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I just have to flip back to my agenda here. Bear with me, please. I've got so many tabs open.
Oh man, I thought we were done.
Well, I mean, we don't have much. Here's the thing. We definitely got to talk about our next meeting, which frankly, I think there was some conflicts on schedules and stuff, but let me just go back in order here and let me regroup. Because we went out of order for new business for the school board. But I know I know Naomi's not necessarily a guest because she's always with us, but Naomi, I just want to confirm, as far as new business is concerned, you said there were no other warrant articles that we haven't addressed as of yet, correct?
Yeah, we're not adding any. I had asked you or mentioned to you that it was brought to my attention the night that I met with you that there was a request for $14,500 for like 1/3 of the master plan study, and the selectmen have felt that we're not going to move forward with that this year. So there are no more than what I gave you that night. As far as the money or anything we're doing, the petition window is still open. That doesn't happen until Tuesday, January 12th. So, I mean, I'm going to I'll have all of my final words together for Monday. And then whatever comes through the door Tuesday is a petition I can't change anyway. I would just add to the bottom of my warrant. And then we move on to our public hearing, which is Monday, January 18th. So that doesn't leave you guys an awful lot of time. If you're going to come up with, like Megan had mentioned, you guys come up with like a preliminary, we always call them blurbs, but I hate that word, recommendations. You guys come up with your preliminary recommendations and go, actually, let me back up. Jackie was correct. We'll give you what we have to go to the public hearing. And then after the public hearing, we have set deliberative session for January 6th. We are doing it in person and we're doing it in the gym.
You said January 6th?
It's February. If I said January, that's tonight. So we all
No.
missed it.
Yeah.
No, I meant February 6th is a Saturday. We're going to do 9 o'clock instead of the CAF. We're going to use the gym. Usually it's attended by, we've never had more than 100 people in person. And there's room enough in the gym versus a CAF to social distance. We'll have PPE available for anybody that needs it. I know NHMA has been talking about some guidelines, but a lot of the communities have moved to auditoriums or gymnasiums, especially in SB2, because they don't get more than 50 to 75 people and 20 to 30 of them are staff members. So, they still get to go to the ballot in March. So we're going to proceed forward. I've already advertised. The school has given me permission to use the gymnasium for both the public hearing on Monday, the 18th, as well as February 6th, because we can only fit 6 people in the conference room. So.
Okay.
Naomi, what time you said Monday, January 18th is the town public hearing. What time is that at?
7.
7. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're going to do that, and we're going to do the rest of our meeting over there anyway. We're not going to pick up and go back across the street. We're just going to do whatever we got to do, but it's going to be at 7.
Naomi, I think everything we have final in terms of the prior warrants and the budgets, or were there some tweaks done that we need to now?
You guys saw most of the tweaks. If there is anything for you to see, maybe a word change, no dollar amounts, no purposes are going to change from what you saw. Because we met Monday, then you met the following Wednesday, and I fixed the language from the board that Monday. So you guys saw pretty much the final product. A couple Mondays after that, Mr. Campana brought to our attention, consistency over some of the articles with the cruiser and the 10-wheeler. 1 year was written one way, one was another. So we're just going to strive for consistency and make sure that we have done it the way we've always done it. That would be really the only tweaking.
Naomi, is the public hearing in the cafeteria or in the gym?
You're going to see the notice said cafeteria, but it was brought to my attention yesterday, even though I've advertised it in the newspaper for the CAF, that because there's still food being prepared, they need 24 hours. So I can't use the cafeteria. So I'm going to stick a big note on the door to go to the gymnasium because I can't use the CAF.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we're good. I mean, I really was just wanted to combine the subcommittee comments or questions between the town and then new business, which is kind of what we just did here. Is there anything else in terms of new business anybody else needs to discuss and that I didn't know about? Okay. Let's do this. As far as new business, let's just talk about so the next meeting, in terms of the next meeting we have as a committee, it's going to be for us to deliberate warrant articles and budgets. Sounds like we pretty much have what we need, but and I scribbled notes as I was talking here, but it sounds like with the school meeting on next Wednesday and next Friday, nothing would be changed by that. So can we collectively just look at a calendar here to see and agree on our next meeting? Why do I not have a calendar up? Bear with me a second here. Megan, if you've already got it figured out, please jump in. And help.
Yeah, so it looks like, so next week we have the school on Wednesday and Friday. We traditionally do our blurbs right up after the public hearing. So, and then of course the town public hearing is on the 18th. Do we do like meet on the 20th and do the school blurbs and then plan to meet on the 27th to do the town blurbs? Because honestly, I don't think we're going to get through all of it one night. That has not been our, yeah, we just haven't.
No, I got what you're saying. I'm in agreement with you. I think what's the worst that happens? We are super efficient and we minimize and get everything done and only have to do it in one night. Let's just plan for the two.
Yeah.
But we have some do we have any logistics challenges, Naomi? Because I know that originally on the calendar when you guys were allowing in-person meetings, I thought there was some potential conflicts. So I guess because Naomi moderates, we need to make sure that she is available on the 20th and the 27th.
Oh, you know, nothing else I'd like to do on a Wednesday night, so. So
at least we don't ask for Friday nights, you know?
Yeah, well, that's.
May I just have a comment, Tom?
Yeah.
Really, if you look at the school budgets, the John Stark and Ware, you're only going to be dealing with, their budget in each case and the contract issue. So I don't know if it would take a full meeting to cover those and make our recommendations, because we're talking about a total of what, 6 warrant articles? Less than that. Unless there's something else. There's a contract in each case and there's the budget in each case. So 2 warrant articles per school district. I don't think we need a whole meeting on that. So perhaps we could do at least some of the town, if not the whole thing.
Tom, Clow, I think that's what Tom Downing was saying, was that we'll come with the anticipation, like we're at least going to get through the schools and hopefully start the town. And if we can get through all of it on the 20th, then that would be fabulous.
Yeah.
I agree.
I didn't understand that.
It was okay.
Yeah, I haven't been feeling well, so I'm not being super clear. What I would say to you is, I think we've all learned that after 10 o'clock, not really, most of us aren't thinking clear anyway. So I'm not saying we have a rule, but I think we probably should use that as a guideline and get through what we can get through. And if we go to that 10 o'clock period, maybe we make a call on one we cut off and go to the next. So the proposal on the table is next meeting is the 20th, with the 27th being the tentative as needed.
And Naomi, these would be via Zoom, correct?
Yeah, because we kept the town hall at least is going to be closed for the month of January. So yes.
Okay.
And I'm available both nights. Doesn't matter.
Okay. Thank you.
I have another, I could say, concern or recommendation as far as how we handle it. And that is, if we have a recommendation to give back to the Board of Selectmen or back to a school district a recommended change, and we gave them some time to work with, it might be a more appropriate way than just doing a thumbs up, thumbs down on a warrant article without that time for reconsideration by one or the other of the boards. I don't know how that maps out in our timeline, but I mean, you see what I'm getting at? Instead of saying, okay, this is the blurb, this is what we're going to say, without allowing a time in there for the, we'll say the town to react to our recommendation. it just seems like it would be better to come to an agreement rather than just give a thumbs up and thumbs down on the various warrant articles at the end of the process.
Thank you, Tom. I think that's good input. What I'd like to get an understanding, and I know between Bill and Neil have been around a long time. I guess I'd like to understand, has this been done before, and is it feasible? Because I happen to agree, it does seem like a thumbs up, thumbs down scenario the way we do it. So maybe Bill, if you don't mind, maybe giving you perspective, or someone else has been through this for more than a year or two. I know we have a lot of new people. Oh, Chris, I forgot about Chris. Excuse me. My apologies, Chris.
After the budget hearing, even if we did suggest something, it's pretty final according to the RSAs. So we can't, unless we have another meeting this week or over the weekend, which we'd have to advertise because all our meetings have to be posted. We're on a time crunch as far as asking for a change. At least we can do it for the town, but the school, because their budget hearings are so close, I don't see how we could do that unless we met tomorrow night or something.
Yeah. My concern, if you read the actual Finance Committee ordinance, I believe it does talk about making recommendations. And that's where I'm coming from with this. And I'm really talking more about the town because their warrant is so much longer always, although this year it's a lot shorter than sometimes, but the school warrant is usually pretty straightforward. But again, there's room for recommendation there. There's been some ideas tossed out tonight unofficially. I just think that it's an appropriate way of doing it, and maybe it's late in the process to start that. But if you read the ordinance, I think that's what the ordinance is recommending that we do.
But we can do it for the town. We have more time than we do with the school.
Well, take a look at the ordinance and think it over.
So Tom and everyone, so usually we have our public hearing and take input from everybody on the 18th, just like the school's going to do on Wednesday and Friday next week. At that point, we could make changes that night, and then you guys would still have time on, you're going to see basically my final warrant on the 20th after the public hearing on the 18th. And that's when you guys would put together your narratives to go to deliberative session. Because we still have time to change the budget from any input that we might have. But you would have my final warrant and probably the school final warrant on the 20th, ready for town meeting or deliberative sessions.
But the Board of Selectmen has the right to make a change right up till the deliberative session, correct?
Yeah, and if we got your narratives and there's something they wanted to prepare for, they could make the motion on the floor at deliberative to make a change if there was something that really they wanted to change. You're right, you can make it up to then.
And Neil had a comment as well.
Yeah, I think Tom's suggestion is an important one, and I don't think there's a time issue here. Let's assume that we meet on the 20th and we say, and we decide that some budget needs to be changed by X amount. And so we write a blurb that says we support this. But if the budget were reduced or increased by X amount, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. We oppose this, but if the budget were increased or reduced by X amount, we would support it. That can be our recommendation. That's published immediately. The various school board or town people would notice this, and they have two options. Number one, they could change their budget prior to the deliberative session and then present that at the deliberative session. Or, as Naomi just said, they could propose an amendment at the deliberative session, and presumably if it was in accordance with our recommendation, the voters at the deliberative session would support it. So there are opportunities for us to act, write the blurb, make a decision based on what is in front of us now, but also provide recommendations for changes if we're so inclined. And there would still be time for those changes to be incorporated, at least at 2 different levels, by either the schools or the town.
I see Bill shaking his head.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's great input, guys, folks. Thank you very much. So it's settled, that we do have a window to do a little, to do that sort of work if we need to. We'll lock in for the 20th. Obviously talking about the schools and the town as time allows. And I think that's all I have for new business. Just want to go around. Is there anybody else? And I know I already asked this once, but just in case, any other new business that needs to be discussed or brought up? Okay, that said, here's what we have left. We've got one old business item on right to know and meeting minutes. I'm hoping we don't get bogged down with both, but let's talk about the right to know.
Tom, do you want to go back to the subcommittees first?
Yeah, if you think we need to, absolutely.
I don't think there's anything to report, but just to make sure that we address it, because the Stark and the Ware School District hasn't met since we last met. And
I'll let you drive on that, Meg. Whatever you want to do.
Because our last meeting was on the
16th, I think.
Right. Yeah, and the Ware School Board meeting was the night before. Has John Stark met since then?
Okay.
I don't have it in my calendar.
No.
No? Okay, so unless there's nothing to report there, does anybody from the town subcommittee have anything to report or no?
Well, you heard it all, I think, at our last meeting with the
Yep.
town, the whole
Okay.
warrant and budget. I don't, James, I think you were at the last board meeting. I wasn't there.
I attended 2 weeks ago. I missed this last one.
Oh, I think I was that one.
But there wasn't any budgetary information.
Okay. All right, then Tom, we can go on to whatever you want. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't skip over something just in case.
I'm really glad you did. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so in terms of right to know, so I realized that we had the right to know request. We had communicated that we would respond to that request by our last meeting. Unfortunately, I was pretty ill and not able to do much. So that's not really a big deal, but we do need to wrap up that discussion. So what I need to do is a couple things. I need to review a couple pieces of information with the committee, and I also need to get feedback or an indication from all the committee members where you stand on that communication. I started a little spreadsheet. Let me just start first with just a refresher on the right to know request. The request was for any and all finance committee members' emails beginning August 2020 to present that have anything to do with 2021 CIP, budgets, or warrant articles. So that was the request. And the reason I'm reading that is for a few reasons, just to get everybody back up to speed. But also, I did get responses from a couple committee members. Tom Clow was even kind enough to send me emails. What I would say to the team is, and it's totally up to you what you send, but Tom, I believe the material on the emails you sent was not within the scope of what this request was, just as an FYI, but you're still welcome to submit it on the record. And so what I, as a chair, will need is an indication from everybody, not at this very moment, whether or not, no, you have nothing that you believe falls into that request, yes, and when you'll be sending it, by. But before we do that, at our last meeting, and I apologize, I'm losing my voice here. We had asked for, I think several people, including Neil and myself, we were looking for clarity around the type of discussions that fall under this right to know. And so I think if I read correctly, and I had asked Laura, our town attorney, to send some specific, her opinion to the committee members on a right to know. So I hope everybody got that. It looked like everybody was CC'd on that. Okay, so
Quick question, was there just one email? Because for some reason she had my email incorrect. This is Nicole. So I did get an email, but was there just one or was there more than one?
I got you.
There was then a follow-up because Neil asked a question.
yeah, there was. So then my next question is, so if you didn't get the second, and that's what I wanted to address, was the second email, because I want to make sure that everybody had the benefit of what that response is. What I don't want to do is, I don't think we need to read everything verbatim here, but the spirit of the first email was her opinion on what the right to know fell within. Yes, Neil asked for clarification, but I don't believe that went to the entire group. And I'm mostly concerned with communicating what Laura's opinion was. So it's just more clarity on what her opinion is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read her opinion part of this email. And if we need to make the whole thing part of the record, the whole email thread, that's fine. What I really want you to do as committee members is to make your own determination on where you feel the risk is, because you may very well be having conversations. But what I'll tell you is her perspective is, meaning the town attorney, is that no conversations should be had in regards to committee business. You'll see from her wording, she says it a lot better than I. So I'm just going to read this paragraph, which is with her email in her last reply. RSA 91A2-A prohibits all communications outside a meeting which are intended to circumvent the spirit and the purpose of the chapter, not only sequential communications. One of the purposes of the statute is to ensure the greatest possible of access by the public to the discussions of the public bodies. There's some typos in here. I did read it verbatim, just so you know. Your example of the Ware Finance Committee member who you want to be free and have private conversations with other members to try to persuade them, and your acknowledgement that the effort may result in basing decisions on reason that may or may not be disclosed to the full committee or therefore to the public, is a prime example of the type of behavior that the legislature wanted to, and in fact did, prohibit. Therefore, if one member of the Ware Finance Committee is essentially lobbying another member to vote one way or another on a town budget, regardless of whether those two individuals constitute a quorum, the communication is in direct contradiction of the purpose of the right to know law. That discussion should be absolutely, sorry, there's a typo, I'm still reading it verbatim. That discussion should absolutely be had in person at a meeting. So if the public and the other Ware Finance Committee members have the benefit of the conversation and an explanation as to the reasoning behind the members' votes. In fact, the legislative history of the 2008 amendment, which adopted RSA 91A-A, makes it clear that that provision was adopted precisely to prevent the very scenario you present. So in the spirit of things, Neil presented a scenario so that he could get specific clarification. I thought it was a fair question. What I would say to this is, where is it? There was one other comment further down the road. Oh, point to note that the, and I don't know what this means, the leg history is well over 100 pages and includes transcripts and hearings that support her answer. Neil had requested that supporting documentation. I was not authorized to have those services beyond the initial request from Laura. So what does it really mean? I'm not a lawyer. It seems to me like if I'm having conversations or anybody else having conversations about committee business, regardless of whether it's a quorum, she is recommending that we not do that because that's a direct violation. Whether you think it's in violation or not, I'm not to judge. I would say each committee member is on their own in terms of managing your own risk. Somebody pushes the envelope when you're having those discussions, they could probably go to the Attorney General and who knows what they would say. I just wanted to be transparent on those discussions. We're done. We're no longer getting advice from Laura on this. The committee needs to make their own decisions individually. That said, I do need to close out the request and formally respond to that. So if anybody is willing to, based on that paragraph, give me an indication now as to whether they do or they don't, I'd like to keep track of that. If you want to do it offline and send it to me separately and give it some thought, that's fine too. But I do need to round out this request and formally respond. Any questions?
Yeah.
I have one too.
Chris, okay, yeah, sorry, Chris was first.
My understanding was that there were some communications that didn't, that weren't about our official business and the right to know law, but that Leah was going to append to minutes. And they were sort of a separate thing so that all our communications would be collated somewhere for the record. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chris. That's actually an old business item I completely forgot about, but that I did just do, which is that previous conversation that stirred this discussion, that we determined that we were, well, I determined that we were in violation of the right to know, and Tom and Neil made the same comments. So that action was done, which is I took the conversation, I inserted the parts of the discussion that were not in the total thread, if you get my point. So that it's a total and complete conversation. And I've sent that to Leah to be added as the addendum to the meeting minutes prior, which is what we all agreed on.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry to the team for not mentioning it. Sorry, who was next with the question?
I just wondered, I'm confused by this because I don't know what, is this an issue? I mean, are there people that have been communicating business separately? Because I am not aware of that.
Well, I would say I can speak for myself. I am not, but it is my understanding that this has been past practice.
Oh. Okay.
Is there any historical members here that can comment besides me? I don't want to get into debate, but my understanding is that this was a regular occurrence.
I'll just say it was my understanding too, that it was a regular occurrence.
If it was a regular occurrence, it did not regularly occur with me.
Same, but.
It obviously occurred last year.
So now that being said, right, the use of emails to circumvent the spirit of the law is what's at question. If we are having a conversation in email with the full intent of making it public and understanding that it should go public, I don't think that has a problem with it. So as long as we make that public, it's part of our public record. So I don't think we need to be afraid of email per se. We just need to make sure that we're actively documenting it.
Yeah, and James, I appreciate that, and I tend to agree with you. What I would say is, especially having to piece together this email thread,
yeah.
all of those people, it was, look, I'm not an administrator. It was a difficult thing to do to follow the whole thread. And it was just a perfect example of how email makes what we're doing harder. And I don't think we need to do that. But, you know, if there is a topic that we need to discuss, we have no choice to discuss an email because we're in between meetings. We just have to make sure that everybody is CC'd. As long as everybody is on the email thread, we can do just as we did, which is make it to an addendum to the meeting minutes. It's a simple solution.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things, and there, Christine, I'm sorry, I just want to jump in here. There are two things that we can make easier on that. One is we don't just keep jumping in with random topics to any email thread, that we stay on topic with that. So if we want to discuss warrant article X, then we discuss warrant article X, and that's it. We don't keep jumping around throwing stuff in. That's if we do. Now, what's going to make everything easier completely, however, is if we avoid the email conversations entirely. And so we just use it as a broadcast medium to say, all right, let's say I have some information on the town meeting. I put it out, bloop, nobody responds to it, right? It's just out there. Or any other articles like that, if Naomi provides information for the group. So if we avoid email conversations, then we avoid the whole discussion entirely.
So James, just point of clarification. Sorry, I know everybody has questions, but point of clarification. But I think what you're talking about is what I originally requested, which is that we don't have conversations that involve debate about the business, but emails are fine for sharing of information for the greater good of the committee. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's the simplest solution.
Okay, sorry. And so Chris was next. It looks like Neil and Nicole have questions, and Tom, and everybody will have a chance to speak.
Tom can explain it. He's lived with it for years as a selectman.
I'm sorry, say it again, Chris?
Well, Tom can explain it because he did this as a selectman. In Laura's first communication, it's very explicit. Never email each other about matters over which the committee has jurisdiction, even if those emails are not between a quorum of committee members. The purpose of the right to know law is to ensure the maximum amount of openness in government. That means we have to do business at a publicly posted meeting. And emailing back and forth is not a publicly posted meeting.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm not next, I guess.
I would say I screwed it up, Tom. So just go ahead. I'll make sure everybody has a chance to speak.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but we did have this issue come up on the Board of Selectmen when I was on the board. And actually, I drafted a policy for the Board of Selectmen to follow, which I believe is still in existence. I don't know if it would apply directly to us or not, but basically it just said what we're saying. And that is, we're not going to have substantive discussions through email, but just exchange information. For example, we got the email that told us that the budget books for the school district were at the middle school. Now, that's certainly not anything that has anything to do with decision making. It's just information that we needed. So that type of email, I think, is the only kind that we should be exchanging, and not anything of substance that would otherwise be presented at the meeting. But maybe we do need a brief policy that says that's part of our operating procedures. But as Chris said, we've gone through this on the Board of Selectmen, and we've had the same opinion basically from Laura years ago to the selectmen. And it comes right down to what we're saying. Don't have any of these chain emails where you were discussing something. They shouldn't exist. Just straightforward information that everybody has to know.
Tom, I don't know that we can write policy. I brought this up with Eileen about something, and I don't even remember what it was, but I don't know that we have the ability. I think in order to write a policy for the Finance Committee, I think the response I got was we would need to have, the town would have to vote on because it'd have to go in our charter or policy.
And that's fine. I'm just tossing that out as
I think it's a good idea. I just think that I think it sounds like the majority of the committee probably agrees that that's best practice anyway. But let's I miss Neil. It looks like, and Neil, I apologize, but it looks like you have a question or a comment.
No comment at all.
I'm sorry, that must have been earlier then. And did Nicole have one?
Well, sort of. So my question is, and maybe this is two parts. So number one, what do you need from everyone in order to respond to the right to know information?
So to your first question, I need to know, the easy question is, do you have any or had any email that you believe falls under this right to know request? If the answer is no, then it's a simple no, and I can keep track of it here as a no. But the reason why I read that refined opinion of Laura so that it was crystal clear what her opinion was, and to give the committee the opportunity to consider or reconsider any communications they may have had since our last discussion or her initial opinion. Does that make sense?
Yes, so that's all, not all, but that is exactly what you need. Pick a date. You need it by Thursday. I'm not sure where you are in the timeline or whatever, for everyone to email you if there's anything that's needed, and then that's taken care of and we're good.
Right. It can be as simple as I think let's see. Yeah, Tom and Bill had already responded, and Bill had said, well, I can say Bill had said no. I haven't had any communications that fall under this right to know request, but this is an opportunity for Bill if he had any other discussions that maybe were not in a quorum. But I think ideally, I'd like to have that. I think we should do it within the next week. I think it's probably more than enough time. It's really just should be a reconsideration of what you've already done. And if the answer is yes, you do believe you've had those, then free to send them. Now, the point of clarification, and I don't think Leah's going to love this, but the attorney did recommend that any communications you send go through Leah as the secretary. It shouldn't be me, not because for any reasons other than she's the official secretary. So what it really is, either to me, no. Actually, you know what, Leah, I'm sorry. If I think about what Laura said, it should all go through you as a single point of record.
Correct.
So
That was my interpretation.
Yeah. So what I need, or we need, is you, each individual member, to send your response to Leah, and that is either no, I haven't had any communications in regards to CIP town budget from August 2020 moving forward, right? Everybody has does everybody have the right to know request?
Yes.
Yep. Or yes, and here's the way I'll communicate or send it to you. Am I being clear enough? I mean, does that make sense? Does everybody got it?
I did the right to know request because I don't remember seeing an actual copy of it. I only remember hearing it being read at our last meeting.
I will
Eileen did send a copy.
Eileen did. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll go back and look for that then. Thank you.
And is that response CC to all of us? Just curious.
When you say the response, which response are you
The
referring to?
response saying, I've sent 27 emails to Harvey Schwartz. If you know what I mean. You said send them all to Leah. I mean, I don't have any, but is whoever sends it, is that to all of us?
No. Oh no, God no, please. Thank you for asking. Yes, please don't do that. If there are 27 emails, yeah, though that wouldn't, we don't want to do that to everybody's inbox, and it's not necessary. The reality is that the right to know request came from a particular person, and we need to respond to that person.
Mm-hmm.
Leah, am I on track? Does that make, yeah, okay.
Yes.
I don't see.
I'll compile the responses and then I'll send them off to you so you can put together your response to the request.
Okay.
I don't see an email from Eileen to me with that. The last one
I'm happy to send this. I don't want to try and do it live because my email is wonky, but I will send the actual right to know to the entire committee right after this meeting. In other words, the right to know request, not the statute.
Right. Thank you.
So back to the original question that either Nicole or Megan had, which is, what do you need from us? I am asking that this action be done by the 13th, January 13th, 2021. I would like, the goal is for the emails to be organized and to give Leah a reasonable amount of time. I think the ultimate goal is if we could get any responses, if there are any, by the next meeting, which would be the 20th. Let me just look at my notes. I think that was it on this topic. Okay, I'll just wrap it up and say it sounds like the majority of the group agrees. And if somebody chooses to act outside of what this legal opinion is, you're on your own. If somebody pushes you and, calls the AG, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, let's see here. There is one last item I actually forgot to mention. I mentioned the conversation with Laura. One of the emails did go directly to Laura, and nobody in the committee was authorized to go to Laura, other than myself. And then, to tell you the truth, I'm not authorized any longer. The request was refilled, already replied to. So just I forgot to mention that. And if you need further legal counsel, you're on your own as well. But I think Laura put that in her email that she couldn't represent anybody anyway. Okay. So there's no other questions. We're going to move on. And I think we're, get back to my agenda.
The last thing we have is the meeting minutes from December 16th.
Yep, thank you. Megan still had it up. Okay, so meeting minutes. I already talked about the addendum that I'd sent in for the last meeting minutes. As far as this meeting minutes are concerned, I'll be honest, I only skimmed through. I did find, Leah, I did find like there was an issue with even the date at the end of our next meeting. But my question for the committee is, did anybody else happen to go through just to peruse and see if there were any typos or things that need to be corrected? And because I honestly was sick and had no chance to do it.
Tom, this is Neil.
Yeah.
I thought the minutes omitted the discussion that we had about appending various email to the minutes. And I thought that was supposed to be in the minutes, and the emails that you say you appended to the prior minutes were supposed to be in these minutes. Did I get that wrong?
No, I actually, I agree with you. I think that I guess I assumed it would. Leah, do you know if that was included? Because it's a long meeting minute. She typed like crazy.
There's nothing in the minutes about that discussion.
Leah, you're muted.
Okay, so can you clarify again here what you were?
So Leah, what Neil is talking about is we discussed the whole topic of having finance committee business debate through email. And I pointed out the fact that we were in violation of the right to know just because of that discussion itself, because we were talking about committee business. It was my example of it. And rather than me reading the whole entire email thread, we came to an agreement that we would just amend the meeting minutes, which would include that thread, which is what I gave to you today. So what Neil's saying is the meeting minutes from our last minutes, it didn't reflect that.
Oh, it didn't reflect the discussion that we were going to amend and add.
Yeah, committee agreed.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I can add that in there. I would, yeah, that's an easy fix.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And the other thing I saw at the end was the next meeting. It said our next meeting was December 16th, when in fact our next meeting was December 30th.
Yep.
Which still has to be, even though we had it on the 6th, still has to be the 30th.
Yeah. Okay. Changed it back.
I only did a cursory review. I didn't find any other errors or omissions in there. And so that was my question to anybody else, that we can go to a vote to accept the meeting minutes. It's so detailed, I'm willing to accept them the way they are, but that's up to the rest of the committee to vote. So I would say, I didn't hear any other comments, so let's move to accept the meeting minutes for 12/16/2020.
As amended.
Yes, as amended.
Of course, as amended with the date and the addition to the of the comment on geez, I don't even know how to explain it. As amended, we'll leave it alone. Thanks, Neil. Do you have a second?
I'll second it.
Can I just ask Leah, I was looking through them really quickly and I found a couple grammatical errors. Not, you know, just so that we don't look like on the
No,
second.
I appreciate any of that because after I type them, honestly, I hate having to read back.
I understand. Rereading your own stuff is horrible. Under warrant articles, the Article 2, the last full line after park, you have a question mark. It should be a period. Right? Anticipated revenue to include the new fee structure.
It was a question.
Oh, it is a question. You're right. Sorry. Ignore me. No, you're right. Then the only thing was at the very bottom that I've seen so far is under adjournment. You have 7 on December 16th.
Oh, okay. Germany was turned at. Yep.
That's all I found.
Look at.
In my
Okay,
quick
got
look.
it.
Okay, so are we voting or what?
Yeah.
Tom, you're muted.
Huh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I was just considering this part of debate. So if nobody else has any debate or comments. All right, we'll put this to a vote. So all in favor, I would say, what I would say is just say your first name would be the easiest way to do this. All in favor of accepting the meeting minutes as amended for December 16th, 2020. Just say a name. I'll start with Tom.
Tom.
Gary.
Megan.
James.
Nicole.
Bill.
I think we heard everybody but Neil.
Neil.
Okay. So that sounded like all in favor. Any opposed? Abstain? Nope. So meeting minutes are accepted. This is weird, isn't it? It's weird doing it this way. Okay. That was our last order of business. I'm just going to ask because this has just been weird and confusing. Is there any other business that we need to discuss? Questions, clarity?
Yes, Tom, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
We received a lot of information today in terms of those briefing books that the school provided for individuals, and we've received a lot of paper from the town. Is that part of our record? And if so, where does one find it?
So I'll give you my perspective, and I think the other committee members can do the same. Since it was provided to us electronic, I believe that, and if are you asking so that the public has access to those records?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to assume. Then it seems to me like we should just publish the link to those records rather than offering to distribute a book. Is that what you're thinking?
Some way that our record is complete, and whether it's through a link or whether we have it available on some website that the town sets up for us, it doesn't matter, or whether it's in paper and the record's held in the selectman's office or something. But it should be everything we do, including correspondence, legal opinions, all of those kinds of things should in some way be part of the committee's record, so that if a member of the public wants access to it, there's some place for them to go and everything is there.
I think it's a fair point. Well, how about in this instance, we have the electronic, it's a link. So this seems to me like the most logical solution and the easiest thing to do is to embed the link that Megan had provided, or Jackie had provided to Megan, into our meeting minutes.
Oh, that's fine. But we had other material given to us previously by Naomi and other people, which I don't know that there were links for. Some of it is changing because the budget was one way on one date and then it was amended on another date, and the changes, the progress from budget draft to budget draft would be part of the record that the public should be able to see. I don't think we need to make a decision on this today, but it's something you might want to think about so that when we're finished and the committee it completes its work, there is a complete record.
So
Yeah.
look, go ahead, Chris.
All of the budget materials for the town are available to anybody by request from the finance officer of the town.
That's true, Chris, but that's not part of our record. The fact is
No,
that
but if we make that statement in our record, I don't think the town posts it on their website.
however we do it, as long as somebody can come and in one place get all of the records and actions and documents, communications that came to or from this committee in one place, then we've done it. Whether it's by links or otherwise, I don't think matters. But we shouldn't say to a person, oh, the finance committee got this document, but you have to go on your own and ask the finance administrator for it. There should be a link directly from our website or whatever to that finance committee finance administrator document.
Yeah, Neil, it kind of sounds like we're creating work that we might not necessarily have to do. Like, I get what you're saying. You think it would be nice, but I don't have the administrative time to organize that stuff. If it's as simple as a link, sure. But I have a question for Naomi. In terms of the selectmen in the town, how does it work with you all? You have working documents that change from meeting to meeting. Do you just post the final version? How does that work?
I mean, typically at the beginning, you'd say the finance administrator presented revenues, and Beth has them by date, and they have, if it changes week to week, just like when you go to the police department arrived on the 4th of December to present his budget, the finance, you can ask the finance administrator, she keeps the copies by the date. Do we post the final? No. But if somebody presented you a budget, I mean, why wouldn't you go back to the person that presented it to you instead of making more work for yourself?
Sorry, I didn't realize that I wasn't on mute. Eileen actually commented in the comment section that each of those bodies is responsible for their own documents. I would agree with Naomi. I don't see why we should recreate the wheel if the SAU has it out on their website, which they do, and the town, they would go for that information. Yes, they're giving them to us, but then what happens if we don't have the most updated information and then someone's like, well, this changed, but we don't have that yet?
If I can interject just a little bit too, if it's a public link, we could probably include that, but if it's not necessarily public, we just need to be aware of that we shouldn't make things public that aren't already public.
Yeah, I think, James, that's a good point. I think as a rule going forward, there's nothing wrong with us adding a link to a meeting minutes if we think it's pertinent. And I think this is a perfect example because there's great documents in there.
Should we just make sure, verify with the school, with the SAU, that they want us putting that link out there?
That's a good question. Jackie's still on the line.
I mean, it's a public document. I'm presenting it in a public meeting. It is in still draft form until it goes to the public hearing and gets accepted by the board, but you can link that. I'm waiting until after public hearing to make it public, but you're welcome to.
Thank you. And Eileen just made a comment. You can state that we're looking at a budget document and then the date when we're discussing it, basically making reference so that the public knows what the document we're discussing. That sounds like best practice. So thank you, Eileen.
Yeah, so Leah, can you just make sure that in the notes that for the SAU link that it just says that this isn't final, or, yeah. I just don't want someone to look at it and get upset.
And the spirit of things, Neil, like, totally makes sense. I get the public should have access to it, so I can appreciate your question. Okay. Am I missing anything else, Megan? I'll ask you finally.
No, I think you're good.
Okay, so we're going to close the meeting. I don't know that I need a second, but a motion to close or end the meeting at 9:32 p.m. I hope you all have a great evening, and I look forward to speaking with you in 2 weeks, I think.
Correct. 2 weeks.
Yep.
I know.
All right, have a great night,
Have a
everybody.
good night.
All right.
Bye.
toodles.
Enjoy. Thanks.